Right, Roger. Today is a very special film indeed. Celebrating 35 years, 35th anniversary, it's just been celebrated by Warner Brothers. We are talking about The Goonies.
Goonies, my goodness. I mean, Pascal, how did it get to be 35 years? But as always, when we have these little trips down memory lane, it does bring back so many fabulous memories of our younger days of consuming these films. Now, I remember, I think I might have been a little bit reticent originally from going to see the Goonies. It came out in 1985, as you say, and there was lots of great films coming out around that time. Back to the Future, which we've already talked about on the podcast. Indiana Jones was around that time. Star Wars 3 was about Return of the Jedi was a little bit before that. And I just thought, oh, do you know what? This looks like a silly film with kids in it. And I didn't really think I was going to enjoy it. But I went to see it, and it was just such great fun. And in some ways, it was almost like children pretending to be Indiana Jones. Now, that sounds a bit naff, but they just pulled it off so well. And it was one of those great films where the cast were just, even though they were young, you felt as if they'd been acting and working and living and playing and adventuring together for years and years. It was just a magical combination, and I think what did sell it to me in that time was that sort of, I'm watching Indiana Jones or young Indiana Jones, or even I guess a sort of Tomb Raider type thing, although that's sort of out of sync in terms of time. But looking back, I might never have gone to see this film, and
Oh, I
yeah,
mean, for
it was
me,
just such good fun.
I just couldn't wait. So my parents actually bought me the book. Every film back then was getting little novelization. So I read the book, and it was a few weeks before we managed to go to the cinema, because for us it was quite thorough. It was always quite a long drive in the car to go and see this film. But there was, trailers, there was people talking about it in the streets and so on. And for me, it was like, so it's like pirates, a treasure map, traps, caves, tunnels, and
Yes.
baddies, the Fratelli brothers. I mean, it was just so magical. And I think for me also, it was the first time where there was actors about my age, because
Mm.
in 1985, I would have been 16 roughly. And I think it was roughly the average age of the actors or the characters suddenly. So I think I don't think people have not seen the Goonies, but if you haven't, please rush. So the reason why we chose it as well, Roger, today is because 35th anniversary. Warner Brothers are releasing a 4K box set, which looks like a little treasure chest, where you have access to your 4K, your Blu-rays, your cards, your treasure map. There's all kind of anniversary thing going on there. But for me, it was this idea of, it was with kids, but actually, they was quite edgy. I mean, this movie actually got quite a few scenes cut when it was shown on television back in the days. So firstly, they had to cut the swearing.
Mm.
So the infamous kind of claim by ITV in the UK was, well, it can't be for families because they say the SHIT word 20 times in the film. That's unacceptable. Then you had obviously some of the tension, the kind of Fratelli brothers are quite menacing. Then you had obviously some very strange moment with Sloth, which had to be cut and so on. So for those people that watch it on TV, it was so kind of cut back that when they discovered it again on DVD and Blu-ray, they went like, "This is a different film." I don't remember half of those scenes.
Mm. Mm. And it's also one of those films, Pascal, which when you're a film buff and a film geek like we are, I just love seeing actors in films and trying to make that connection. Well, what have I seen them in before? Where do they go on to? And this is almost like, again, a treasure chest of actors that have gone on to do bigger films later on. Now, Corey Feldman, who plays Clark Devereaux in The Goonies, he went on to be in The Lost Boys. He was one of the Frog brothers in The
Yeah.
Lost Boys, which is another fabulous film that we probably have to talk about at some point on the show. Robert Davey, who was one of the aforementioned Fratelli brothers, the baddies, he was in Die Hard. He was also the baddie in the second Timothy Dalton Bond film. It's such a such a great looking baddie, him. And this is one that you probably don't know. Is Anne Ramsey, who was Mama Fratelli, who I've always thought was quite a scary looking
She
woman.
was, yeah.
She was actually in Every Which Way You Can, which was one of the Clint Eastwood films with the orangutan. And I'm pretty sure, and I can't remember now, she was also in a film where there's two people on a train, and the one of them's an author, and he's trying to work out how to start a book, and they're trying to work out whether they should murder this woman, and in the end she just gives him the line to start the book after he's been trying to start the book for years and years, or months and months, and that's he says, right, we're going to kill her right now. So I just love this is one of those films where every single actor in it has gone on to something or has been in something, and that for me is just as enjoyable as watching the film itself.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously what we had here were three incredible storytellers coming together. Steven Spielberg, who came up with the story and helped produce it. You had Chris Columbus, who then, brought the screenplay based on Steven Spielberg's story, and then Richard Donner, who had the enviable job of directing. And when you watch the making of documentaries and all interviews, basically Richard Donner complains about how unruly and excited all the actors were. But you can't blame them, can you? I mean, literally, some of the set designs are incredible. And if you are a young actor, for people like Sean Astin, who went on to do so many movies, including Lord of the Rings, Josh Brolin, goodness, who then becomes Thanos, decades later. If you just, get up in the morning, jump in a car and taken to a cave with a, kind of full-size pirate ship and there's actual treasures and real coins to play with, you're not going to stand still, are you?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So are you going to buy the 4K treasure chest?
Yes, so it's my birthday very soon, so it's happening. But so in terms of the film itself, of course, the marketing was done back in the 1985 with the traditional means of radio, TV, posters, and so on. What is interesting, Roger, in terms of the marketing then, now the poster for the film was something that was so kind of eye-catching. I remember it to this day. We have a scene of the actor, the character Brandon, played by Josh Brolin, hanging onto a stalactite, and then all the other characters hanging onto each other's legs, making all this line, with essentially almost like a giant pit below them. But this image was never used just for the poster of the film. And when the poster was designed, they use different characters in different orders because they didn't know what to choose in the end. So whilst they settled on the Josh Brolin being probably the male, the alpha male, and the strongest character to hang on, they tried different characters in different orders before they could settle, and by error sent the wrong posters to the wrong people. So actually, depending where you lived, you would have had a different character leading the charge on the poster. But when it comes to the DVD covers and whatever, it was essentially the group of them hanging over a chest full of gold coins.
Fantastic. They didn't send out any posters where one of the characters appeared twice, did they?
Probably happened. And then the other thing that they did was they published, but probably just after, a storybook where the narrator was actually Joe Pantoliano, one of the Fratelli brothers. Joe Pantoliano, who went on to do so many movies, including The Matrix and Bad Boys and so on. I love this actor. I love him as a chief in Bad Boys as well. But when I was I saw the film again last Christmas. Interestingly, I've got the normal DVD, and watching it again, I was thinking some of it, now looking back, should have been a bit scary, but maybe they got the humor just right because, as you say, Mama Fratelli, it was like a modern witch, wasn't she?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that actress has just got a scary face, and she knew how to use it to pump up the scares. Definitely.
So the film was released on the 7th of June in 1985. We had to wait till November, December for Europe to get obviously the release of the movies. So it was filmed in a real town called Astoria. which is a town that is one of the oldest harbour town in where we're filming, which I think was probably right for this idea of a 17th century, pirate ship and treasure. And the town then on the 7th of June, every 5 years, has a big anniversary when they have a Goonies Day, should I say. And then they have a big celebration, which is absolutely fabulous.
I think I love it when things like that happen. That's a real community thing, isn't it? And it just goes to show that a film like this can have such a lasting effect on the culture of a town or a village. It's very, very special.
They spoke many times about doing a sequel, and every time people say we just can't come up with a better story, I think this is it. And during lockdown, there's an actor called Josh Gad, which you would have seen in quite a few comedies, including Pixels. If you know that, is it Pixels or Pexels? Comment on Pixels. So Josh Gad basically organized a little YouTube series called Reunited Apart, and he was having Zoom calls with actors and directors, and he successfully organized a Goonies reunion. Would you believe?
Fantastic.
So all the actors and Richard Donner and Steven Spielberg, including Cyndi Lauper, who sang the song, were on the Zoom call with him, and the guy was just about to implode with joy. And so they were discussing the film. They even reenacted some of the scenes, and they asked Steven Spielberg there, which was essentially last April, what about the sequel? And he said again, I'm sorry, guys, you nailed it. We can't do better than that. And I wonder whether there's a lesson in that.
Oh, yes. I think there is, Pascal. Quite often, I think, I think TV series fall into this trap as well. You get one sequel too many or one season too many. And unfortunately, that can have a detrimental effect on the original. And yeah, imagine had they put out a rubbish sequel, it would have had a detrimental effect on this fabulous piece of entertainment. So great lesson, if you absolutely nail it the first time, move on to something else.
Absolutely. Now, there were video games, of course. There was also the merchandise. After the event, there was anniversaries, 5, 10, 35 years ago. Can you imagine it? I'm so excited about it. One of the things you can do as well, watching the film now, is pick, obviously, some nods to other films, which were done on purpose, but perhaps would have been easier to miss back in 1985. So there's nods to Gremlins in the film. There's nods to Superman, directed by Richard Donner. There's nods to popular music. So one of the characters, I think it's Corey Feldman, is seen wearing a Purple Rain t-shirt. But of course, Prince had just released the Purple Rain album a year ago in 1984. Data, who played by actually the character Ke-Huy Quan, who was in Temple of Doom, obviously produced by Steven Spielberg. He has a belt full of gadgets, and he has written on with a pen 007. And you've got all this thing going on, that you could miss. And it's also a pleasure to watch it in that way, not only picking up actors, supporting actors indeed, and what they've become, but also picking up all the 80s kind of little nods.
I'm going to use that little app that I talked about on last week's show that tells me where I can find the film or the TV show. That I'm going to make sure that this weekend, The Goonies is one of the ones on our list.
So just to close on film marketing, so the box set has now been kind of issued and is available to buy online. All the different digital channels are streaming the movie for rental and for purchase. But what has been interesting is the way in which Warner Brothers chose to promote, this anniversary. And they've gone solely on Facebook. So they have a Facebook page for the Goonies. And they've been creating square videos with scenes of the film and then a call to action to buy the box set. And I thought it was fascinating that they've gone for you could argue, a very narrow cast form of marketing. What do you make of this?
Again, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the established wisdom would be, with such a popular film, you would think that they would have spread it out as wide as possible across all social media channels. But possibly they're thinking, is it the age group that were young when, like we were when Goonies first came out, are probably more likely to be on the Facebook channel now, as opposed to TikTok, for example, or Snapchat. And that's where they're focusing, because they're not trying to find a new audience for the Goonies, perhaps. Maybe they're just trying to re-engage with those of us who have such fond memories of it from when we were younger.
No, absolutely. And I think the only way in which a younger audience will know about the Goonies is because their parents have told them about it.
Yes, yeah. And force them to watch it
Yeah, absolutely.
5 times.
Excellent. Well, listen, Roger, we could keep talking about the Goonies, the actors and directors for much longer, but we must reserve some of that for future episodes.
Absolutely.
So once again, thank you so much, all our viewers and listeners, for your support. This was Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. Until next time, make sure that when you go out there, your marketing is done right. He was Roger Edwards, and I was Pascal Fintoni. See you on the next one.